breakdowns, and great transition because the first one that we will talk about is Ruan Mei. So I'm sure you guys are already well aware of the characters that are coming out in 1.6, and the first one that we will talk about is the lovely member of the Genius Society, member 81 by the way, Ruan Mei, who we already know from the online information they've given us that she is a support character capable of increasing all allies' weakness break efficiency, speed, and all type resistance penetration. At the same time, she can also deal additional break damage whenever any allies weakness break an enemy, causing the weakness broken enemy's actions to be further delayed. Draven, for what you can tell us about Ruan Mei's kit, I know we've spoken a couple times about things that weren't necessarily included in the 1.6 live stream. One of those things being speed, and something else that they have since added to the live stream in the captions, if you guys watch those videos with the subtitles, is boosted damage. What can you just tell us in general about Ruan Mei's kit?
All right, so yeah, the weakness break effect, she is going to scale off that, but as they said in the live letter, her skill's not dealing damage, it's buffing everybody. Her ultimate isn't doing damage, it's putting up a field. So her basic is the only thing she's really dealing damage with. You're going to use that periodically. She's gonna generate skill points, but you are going to keep her skill up like you do with some of the other, like you do with Hua Hua right now. You want to use a skill, then use a few basics. There is a point where weakness break efficiency is what she increases. She scales off of weakness break. These are two separate things. Weakness break is how much damage is done during a break and how much dot damage or freeze damage or whatever is being done and how long a turn reader gets rewind. That's weakness break. Weakness break efficiency is also sometimes called toughness break. So it's increasing their ability to break the toughness bar faster. But it's very kind of vague on how much. Like we know from some of the other like CN bros, I don't know if you've ever seen their videos, but like this does this much toughness damage. This is the toughness bar of the enemy. How much more toughness bar do we break with her? I can't tell you right now.
Yeah.
The speed boost. Go ahead.
I was going to say, on that point, we've talked about it in our chat like a few times. I'm sure you've probably touched base with it as well. I think Yukong is the only character right now that has like extra break efficiency, right? And that's just the amount of the toughness bar that is depleted with their attacks. Versus
for
when
her,
you
it's
do
her
break.
basic. Right. So that's where it says break efficiency, and the other one says weakness break. Two different things. You see it inside the simulated universe too. It just doesn't explain to you what that means exactly. All right, her speed boost, if you guys are thinking that she's going to be replacing Asta's ultimate, you're wrong. Okay, like, yes, there's a speed boost, but it's not going to be an entire 4-star character's ultimate going on all the time. And all type resistance penetration. So we only have 2 types of, we have, well, I guess 3 types of ways of supporting a character. We increase their offensive capabilities, we can increase the enemy's defense, and we can also reduce their resistances or penetrations. There's a certain amount of diminishing returns. Like if you're using Silver Wolf at max and Pila at max and you throw in all the defense down, you hit over 100% defense down, that's not going to actually do any more. But if you add in all type resistance penetration, now that's a different layer of penetrating the enemy's weaknesses to increase the amount of damage you put out. So I mean, it's a lot of her kit's pretty self-explanatory, except for the fact that they don't mention in this segment, but they mentioned it in the video about the damage boost that you said. Some of this is linked to the skills, some of this is linked to the ult. We know the ult type resistance is heavily linked to the ultimate. They didn't detail the skill too much, and one of these is a passive effect that's just going on all the time. But again, they didn't officially announce certain aspects. Like even the fact of the speed here was not mentioned in the live letter, but it is shown on the official patch website. I think they might be doing that on purpose, leaving a few things off and not telling people about it to incentivize increased clicks for the people who do know about the patch update website.
That's an interesting outlook. I kind of think of it as like she drops and then you find that out and it's like, oh my gosh, if you were on the fence about it, maybe it's a reason to be like, okay, I gotta pull now.
I found the live letter to be, and this happened when Links came out as well, is they don't talk about traceabilities frequently. And sometimes the trace abilities are really important.
Yeah.
Like I think Lynx's was like when they use their ultimate, it does a cleanse for the whole party. I think that wasn't said at the live letter. I'm like, I wanted to use it as a selling point when I'm telling people about Lynx, but I can't because they didn't say anything. I felt the same way about Ruan Mei. I think they actually advertised her pretty mediocrely compared to her real value, because they did not mention that speed boost, and they did not clearly define the damage boost either.
Interesting. So, as good as we might think that she is right now, it looks like when she releases, she might just be even a smidge better, maybe a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, chat, let's talk about Ruan Mei's potential light cones. So we can go over these real quick. The light cones that Draven has suggested, obviously the signature light cone is going to work well with her. It'd be crazy for them to release a light cone that isn't going to synergize well. But the other one is going to be Memories of the Past. You want to kind of guide us through why that might be important, and maybe for the people that don't know, like what Memories of the Past is able to do for us.
All right, so Memories of the Past is a 4-star Harmony light cone. It is from the gacha. I've had people in my community mention, like, well, why you suggest that one if it's a part of the gacha? I'm like, it's a 4-star light cone, guys. I don't know what you want from me. I guess put meshing cogs on them if you don't have that, but that's a gacha light cone too. So it's
yeah,
a 3-star.
Everybody's got coggers.
All right, the reason why we're putting up Memories of the Past is, as we mentioned, she does scale off of break effect. Memories of the Past, even at Superimposition 1, gives 28% break effect, and when the wearer attacks, they gain 4 energy. It can only be triggered once per turn. So basically, she's going to be attacking probably every 2 to 3 turns. Certain things are dependent upon that, and she'll be getting energy. Like Meshing Cogs is very similar, and then she's also getting the break effect. This is very important about what light cone you put on her, because like I said, there is a cap to how much break effect you want for her. You do want to build break effect, but there is a cap. If you can meet that cap without moving into the next sections we're going to talk about when it comes to relics, through things like the light cone, her traces, and maybe parts of certain relics, then that opens up your availability to build her into other aspects such as survivability. So if your light cone, so again, at lowest, it's 28% for memories break effect, it's 56 at Superimposition 5. Can't tell you how much of that gets you to where you're trying to go, but we'll say that at 5, it gets you almost a third of the way, probably, somewhere around there, just off the light cone. All right, because, and when we get into the other bits, we'll get to it. Yeah, but we don't know what her official light cone does officially, so we can't talk about it. You can assume it probably has something to do with break effect.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to say, like, yeah, they may not have announced what the signature light cone does. There's no way for us to know officially. However, if she does have certain stats that she's going to scale off of, chat, we can kind of use context clues with the previous limited characters and their light cones and how the light cones accentuate that playstyle. I don't think it'd be a far cry to assume that, you know, maybe a particular stat like break effect could be involved, but it's great to know that we have a 4-star option that should be relatively obtainable for the masses, even the poor little free-to-plays like me. I even have a copy of Memories of the Past, so that's pretty solid. As far as the relics go, we've got a multitude of options here. So we've talked about speed set, break effect, damage reduction, and HP as far as our relics go. And then for the ornaments, we've also got plenty of options here. Broken Keel could be good. Draven already talked about the survivability. And then Talia, Kingdom of Banditry, again for this break effect. But depending on who you're partnering her with, at the end of the day, she is a Harmony character, and most of these Harmony characters can take advantage of the Penacony set pretty good. But Draven, what of these, at least currently at this, 1.5 going into 1.6 in the game, would you say is going to be the preferred way to build a Ruan Mei?
As far as the Penacony goes, which you can also claim with Von Wick, is that extra 5% energy is the real big kicker to the set pieces, and not everyone is going to benefit from that 5%. If that 5% does not get you to a new threshold of getting your ultimate to turn early, then it's not doing you any favors. I do not know what the official generation charts are. There is a resource that I use, and they also wait until things are officially out and have been vetted and tested frequently before posting. So I don't I can't make a call on the planar ornament set based off of the extra 5% from Penacony or Von Wick yet. My sorry, my personal sorry, I breathed in something.
Dude, I do all the time.
My personal preference is the broken keel set for the obvious reasons of no one wants to be crowd controlled, and she's giving crit damage to the whole party. This will also come into play when we mentioned about team comps. I think she gets a little more out of giving crit damage to the entire party than some other supports characters, and we'll get into that when we get to the team comps.
Okay.
As before, we mentioned if you can meet the break effect goals through your light cones, through your substats, and say a break effect rope, which ideally we kind of were probably going to want an energy recharge rope, but once again, I can't speak to the energy stuff until everything is officially out and rolling. Then you don't have to worry about the break effect from Thief of the Shooting Meteor or the Italia Kingdom of Banditry. You'll be able to go into more beneficial pieces. People are like, what about Force Piece Space Hacker? No. Her ultimate is not buffing the party, it's placing a field out. So the 4-piece isn't going to do anything, but a 2-piece Space Hacker with any 2-piece survivability, I prefer the damage reduction or the HP over the defense set, because the defense set literally gives you half of what the damage reduction set does when you break down the numbers of what 15% defense actually does versus 8% damage reduction. So 2-piece speed with any 2-piece survivability is likely going to be most people's goal for now. But if you do need that extra break effect to hit that threshold, there is the Thief set. Same thing going into the next section of the ornaments. Again, Broken Keel, or if you really want Fleet, Aegis, Fleet of the Aegis.
Yeah, Fleet of the Ageless gives you the extra HP
yeah.
and then boosts the attack based off of speed.
If you prefer that, you can go for that too. But I think the Broken Keel is going to be your best slot typically.
Okay. And then just to make sure that we really touch on it, because most of us here know, but for anybody that might be in the chat right now or, potentially watching this on YouTube, the Hecker Speed set, the 4-piece works great on basically all the Harmony units other than, up to this point, Yukong, because she does damage. And with Ruan Mei, like Draven was just talking about, even though your entire team, your allies will benefit from the field that she's placing, she's not actually doing something to your team. It's to the field. So that distinction right there is going to make the 4-piece not very effective. Just something to keep in mind if you guys were thinking like, oh, I run 4-piece Hecker Speed on all of my Harmony characters. It's not going to work out in the same way. So like Draven was getting at, 2-piece is going to be good, and then one of these other sets for survivability. Okay, sliding into our potential team comps, chat, I would also like to just point out here, we can't go through every single combination of characters. Surely there will be more ways to utilize a Ruan Mei and the other characters that we talk about than what we're showing, but these are just some of the teams that we wanted to highlight. Team number 1 here, we've got Ruan Mei with the double DPSing, a team that I've been interested about for a little while now, with Blade and Jing Liu as well as Lynx featured here as the support. Draven, why exactly would this team right here work out?
So the Blade Jing Liu Lynx combo is already really popular because Lynx can turn Blade into a preservation tanking unit basically through the use of the skill, which is basically giving you like a duo sustain but also more damage output. So this is already a tried and true combination, but the big downfall to this team typically is what you put into support for that team. Because you put in Bronya, well, Bronya will be able to help boost someone like Jing Liu, but the extra attack percent she gives the entire party is not benefited by Blade. The extra crit damage is, but Blade's not getting as much of a benefit from a singular character. So people will put in Pila, and obviously defense down to the entire team is nice. But what Ruan Mei is doing is she is buffing the entire team in the same way. So whatever benefits Jing Liu is getting, Blade is also getting of equal value, because as we said, Ruan Mei is giving out a speed boost to everyone, so it's an equal field of increase. She's giving out penetration, all type resistance penetration, so the mixing of elements works, so it goes out to everyone. Let's see, what was the other? Break efficiencies to everyone. And then also it was a damage bonus to everyone instead of an attack bonus. Yes, Blade scales off attack, but he's HP scaling really, while Jing Liu is attack. You don't have someone who's doing both at the moment. So Ruan Mei is her best slot is going to be supporting 2 damage dealers. So any kind of team that can roll 2 damage dealers, she's gonna be a more efficient support for.
That is very interesting because I know I talk about it a lot. Maybe not everybody agrees with this. I don't understand that, but I'm very much in the camp of you have one DPS unit that you support wholeheartedly. You keep your supports alive through their individual stats and stuff like that. Your sustain goes towards keeping your DPS alive. But with Ruan Mei, if we can go double DPS, and not only that, but I mean, in this instance, Blade and Jing Liu are both like top tier DPSs. It'll be very interesting to see how people are able to run through content because, yeah, Ruan Mei can essentially boost everybody simultaneously. She's not picking and choosing which one that she's focusing on, so that's pretty damn cool. For our next team here, we've got Ruan Mei again, this time with our general, Jing Yuan. We've got Topaz and Lolcha as well. What's the breakdown on this team, Draven?
All right, so you can also replace the Jing Yuan with Dr. Ratio, but for this one, I chose Jing Yuan over Dr. Ratio because, once again, Ruan Mei is supporting both of these in the same way. They're all benefiting from every part of her kit. But right now, there's no content where Hunt super excels. So, like, you might have one enemy, but they're putting up spawns constantly and stuff like that. So this is an opportunity where there is a follow-up tech synergy between Jing Yuan and
Numby.
Topaz. No, Topaz. Topaz right now. So the follow-up is becoming heavy into fruition, similar to how Dot may be coming heavy into fruition. We don't actually know certain things about the future yet. There's speculations, but we do have follow-up team options right now. So once again, they're all benefiting from the speed, the penetration, the break efficiencies, and the damage across the board. So also, Nami wants more follow-up attacks to go off more. Jing Yuan's going faster. That means Lightning Lord's going faster. Same thing for Topaz, taking her turn more frequently. So it's just it's a team that I had been experimenting with using Asta, and it was working. But obviously, Ruan Mei is the 5-star Premier Harmony character, so it's not bringing the same speed benefit, but she's bringing more than speed and attack. She's being speed, damage, penetration, weakness break. That's just a lot more.
Hell yeah.
So with the follow-up attack on the rise, this is going to be a good one for clearing generalized content, because right now we got MOC, which has 3+ people most of the time. We're going to have Pure Fiction, which we'll get into later, but that's just lots of people. Until they get a game mode where it's just like do as much damage to one enemy who never dies until time runs out, Hunt characters aren't going to be as featured on their own.
Sag. Well, dude, Ruan Mei sounds awesome. I mean, I've been interested in her just on a lore perspective ever since that she was announced, but her kit does seem incredible. Chat, if you guys have any specific questions that you would like us to go through, again, Draven can only say so much. We don't want Draven to get in trouble and not be able to continue on with that beta testing. But we'll take a little bit of time to chat about maybe potential other team comp ideas. If you guys had ideas about who you wanted to run Ruan Mei with, what team comp you wanted to use, what relic sets that you wanted to use, we can try to talk about those. And also, Astro, welcome in. Urban, I saw you slide in as well. Hope you guys are having a good Friday. Chat, any questions on Mommy Ruan Mei? Do you think Ruan Mei's hot? I'm going to say yes, 10 out of 10. Draven, what about you?
She's all right.
Damn, all right is crazy. Yo, what up, Latin? Welcome in. What up, Waffly? Does the second break cause DOT? That's actually a great question. I've speculated that yes, it will. Draven, are you able to confirm or deny that for us?
Ice break doesn't cause dots.
Ice break doesn't cause dots. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to assume that's all Draven is able...
Well, this is no knowledge. There's only 4 dots in the game. Mm-hmm. Physical, fire, wind, and lightning. Ice is considered separate. It's its own thing. It doesn't count as a dot. And it says that Ruan Mei's break effect is being based off of her and her break effects. So that secondary pop of the break effect from her ultimate field, that's damage coming from her, is based off of her skill set. So
I don't know if
as far as a dot, I don't believe so.
I don't know if we're talking about the same thing or not. The way that I am understanding this, and the way that I was, again, speculating. So when you break with Ruan Mei's, I think it's when you put the marker above their head. It's like the little flower. If an enemy gets weakness broken while they have that flower mark above their head, it extends the duration of the time that they're broken. And we've seen in the animations from the live stream that it looks like they try to recover. Like their turn comes back up in the order. They try to recover, but they remain weakness broken for presumably like a second duration of that time. During that stage, when they come up in the turn order, if they did have DOTs applied to them, would those DOTs proc, seeing as their turn order has come back up?
So is it that they'll proc again? That one I haven't personally tested, so I'm not sure. I'd imagine they would, though. Okay. Just based on order of operation of how the systems function, I'd imagine that they would proc again if they hadn't already expired.
Okay. So chat, there we go. And yeah, I am curious, like, you know, DOTs only last for 4 turns, 3 turns, 2 turns. So will that count as one of the turns? If so, I would assume that it's going to proc. But if the turn doesn't actually happen until that, you know, enemy is able to go again, then maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Why no team with Himiko, the unit that profits the most from break efficiency? Like Sustain, Himiko, Asta, or Topaz with Ruan Mei. Any comments on that? Again, chat, I will say real quick before Draven goes, it's not like we can talk about every single team combination. Surely, there's tons of ways that you can play these characters. We just wanted to highlight a couple of the teams. But Draven, you have any comments on that? How well the synergy with Himiko will or will not be?
I'm thinking, and I was going to bring this up during the speculation on Pure Fiction for someone like you who's a Herta main. I think a Ruan Mei Herta Himiko team can work, but we can only talk about so many teams at a time right now. Yeah. And so I picked one premier up-and-coming team that's going to have diverse usage, and then one team that people already enjoy. How this character is going to make that team better.
Fair enough. So. Well, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next character. Dr. Ratio, also Rise, welcome in. Chad, we've got another new 5-star character coming in 1.6, and sorry if I'm spoiling it for you guys. I think the news has made its rounds at this point, but we are getting a Dr. Ratio for free, so this is going to be applicable to everybody. Whether you choose to build your Dr. Ratio or not, that's up to you, but at least we know that we're all getting a copy, so you'll be able to take some notes here and try to make the best use of it. So, Dr. Ratio, from what we know, is a DPS character that deals follow-up attacks after he or his allies attacks. He can increase his crit rate and crit damage depending on how many debuffs his enemies have. Draven, what are you able to disclose about this kit for Dr. Ratio?
All right, try and pay attention to your video here. I'll talk while I'm watching it, but in one of the video segments, they actually showed us some aspects of this kit rather than telling us.
Yes.
And I don't think the video clip, this video clip doesn't have it. So, when we talked about the debuffs do different things. So as it says here, his crit rate and crit damage increase depending on how many debuffs the enemy has. Certain things count as debuffs and certain don't. All right. So for example, Clara's mark of counter on an enemy is not considered a debuff. I checked it myself. But what is considered a debuff is Topaz's passive or skill where she marks a target. That does count as a debuff. Also, if you're one of the people who went for Topaz's Light Cone and it has the Tame State on it, which increases follow-up attack damage, that also counts as a debuff. So from watching one of the other video segments, you can see when he uses his ultimate, that's what it allows him to be able to do follow-up attacks when other allies hit the enemy. How many times that'll proc was not mentioned, so I will not. But there's percentages above the enemy's heads, starting as low as 40% is the lowest one they showed us. Then in that same video, you can actually see a debuff on an enemy, and it shows it at 60%. So we can surmise from the information they showed us that having 3 debuffs on the enemy will give a 100% chance for his follow-up attack to trigger when an ally attacks that enemy. As far as how much crit rate and crit damage he can gain from debuffs, I can't answer that question.
Fair enough. Another question.
But we know that 3 is a point that we want to go for. Topaz by herself has 2. Welt by himself has 2. There's a lot of options here.
Fair enough. A question that was brought to me in chat the other day that I didn't know how to answer. But it sounds like maybe it could, maybe it couldn't, based off of when you're talking about Clara as well as Topaz. So Silver Wolf's Light Cone has the opportunity, or has a 100% base chance to implant Ether Code. Do you know if that's going to count towards the debuffs or not?
I don't have it, so I can't tell you, but you can check right now. When you put a status effect on an enemy character, you can click on the little magnifying glass when it's your turn,
Sure.
and then it'll show you whether it's a debuff or other or a buff. It'll specify and name it in there. That's how I was able to see that mark of counter from Clara. It's considered other, while Topaz's skill and Light Cone are both considered debuff because it actually labels them under that chart. So again, off the top of my head, I didn't have Silver Wolf during testing because I don't have her. So I couldn't check that specific sort of thing, but I'd imagine so. It sounds like it's a debuff to me.
Well,
Like
unfortunately,
Pearls of Sweat Light Cone from the Nihility, that is a debuff, and that's a defense down. So I figure it's similar.
so probably it will, but chat, again, I don't have the Light Cone either, so I can't check that. But for those of you guys that are asking, I see people asking about Dan Heng's Slow, and maybe you guys have questions about other potential debuffs, like Draven's talking about. If you are able to use that character / that Light Cone right now, you can just check the enemy status and see what it counts as, whether it's a debuff or not, and then it looks like that's all we're really going to need to know if it'll work for Dr. Ratio or not. So, moving on to the Light Cone options. Chat, again, we are listing Dr. Ratio's signature Light Cone. It would be crazy if it did not synergize well with Dr. Ratio. But the other two that we're going to talk about here are the Herta Shop, Cruising the Stellar Sea. You guys can get this at the Simulated Universe. It's very free-to-play friendly. All you got to do is grind your Simu weeklies, and you'll be able to get it in a few weeks, as well as Dan Heng's signature Light Cone, Only Silence Remains. Can you go ahead and break down why these may be good options for our Dr. Ratio havers?
All right, Dr. Ratio builds just like any other general DPS. We're looking for crit rates, crit damages, speeds, and attack percentages. He's a standard build as far as that goes. Cruising under the Stellar Sea is pretty much the only Light Cone that's giving consistent crit rate up out the gate. And then you can also calculate when they get below 50% health, he gets another increased percentage of crit rate, I think it is. Either way, it's a consistent, powerful Light Cone. It's pretty much best in slot for any hunt character that doesn't have their own signature. What I did was I stepped away from sword play for the 4-star Light Cone and stepped into Dan Heng's Light Cone. Because since we do have multiple enemies on the map frequently and we're kind of trying to narrow them down, we're kind of changing targets in the early sections of combat. We're kind of knocking out the ads to focus on the main boss. During that time, swordplay doesn't get to ramp up because we're kind of knocking out ads and then changing targets. Dan Heng's Light Cone gives an attack buff that's flat at all times, and then if there are 2 or less enemies, gets a crit rate buff. So it's a little easier to calculate when you know what kind of enemy you're going into. But once again, he's just going to scale off the same stuff that you expect a standard carry character to scale from.
Fair enough. The DPSing units are pretty straightforward in this game for the large part. Attack, crit rate, crit damage, give them some speed, and they'll do their thing. So, moving on to our relic options. Not as plentiful as maybe you'd want to see compared to Ruan Mei, but we've got the imaginary set here. We've got the follow-up set here. Remember, chat, like we talked about at the beginning, Dr. Ratio does have a follow-up mechanic literally just played on the screen right here, as well as Salsado for the ornaments. So what about these sets is going to be ideal? Are we looking at 2-piece, a 4-piece of either? Go ahead and break that down for us, Draven. What can we start perhaps pre-farming for our Dr. Ratios?
So right now, as far as what I could tell from my experiences, and it's very similar to even how I build Clara right now, a 2-piece follow-up set, you kind of get the bulk of what's going on from there in the 2-piece imaginary. It's just flat stats. It's consistently good across the board, whether it's a short fight or a long fight. It's less situational. Now, I do have a 4-piece concept here for the imaginary set if you're using him in an imaginary team, especially if you're running him in conjunction with Welt. And we'll get into that into the team comps there. But either way, I mean, a 4-piece follow-up set can work as well. It's just not all of his damage comes from follow-ups. Say, as someone like Topaz, where literally 100% of her damage is follow-up. So the imaginary can be just a little more basic and reliable. And it also splits up the difference between certain percentile combination.
Okay, now...
And then innate Salsado is straightforward. All of his damage is basically follow-up attacks and ultimates.
Easy peasy.
Mm-hmm.
So, question for you, just to do some clarification, because I'm not sure, and I don't even know if you can clarify this for us or not. But the 4-piece follow-up set is or is not practical for Dr. Ratio, because to my understanding, what we've been able to see in these videos and everything, it looks like his follow-up attack will be only able to hit one enemy at a time. And for those of you guys that don't know off the top of your head, for the 4-piece follow-up, when wearer uses follow-up attacks, increases their attack by 6% every time the follow-up attack deals damage. This effect can stack up to 8 times. However, it is removed the next time the wearer uses a follow-up attack. So, to my understanding, if he's only going to follow up against one enemy, and then he can follow up again a following turn, all he's really doing is refreshing that 6% attack bonus. He's not necessarily adding on top of it. Is there anything that you can share along those lines, or am I going too deep?
I can. As far as you guys can see here, a lot of his stuff is a single hit. Now, if you read it, it says when the wearer uses the follow-up attack, increase the attack by 6% for every time the follow-up attack deals damage. We've talked about this in prior collabs that I've done with you, where hit count matters, and they don't talk about it enough in the grand scheme of things. And you go to a website, it's always just the damage numbers. No one's talking about the hit counts. And hit counts matters for proccing debuffs, for removing buffs with the 4-star light cone from the battle pass that's hunt, which is another option. It's just, yeah, it's okay. So yes, since he's only hitting a singular time with his follow-up attacks, you're basically getting that 6% attack increase. This is why I should have been more clear on that, why I think that the 2-piece and 2-piece from imaginary follow-up is going to go good together.
That's all good. Just
because it's more reliable, consistent damage.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we've got a couple different team breakdowns for you guys here. First up is going to be a full imaginary squad. We've got Dr. Ratio paired with Welt, like Draven just talked about, as well as Yukong and Lucha. Now, these mono team comps have been, coming into vogue recently, and I do think they work well given that you're able to pair them against the right resistances. But what specifically about this team comp is going to be beneficial for Dr. Ratio?
Well, General Yukong on Imaginary Team is amazing. She gives passive imaginary damage to everybody. Also, you do not necessarily need the E6 Yukong for this team, as opposed to really needing E6 on Yukong for Imbiber de Lune. Because Imbiber de Lune needs the ult, Yukong's ult, to happen on his turn, because you got to run him slower than most other people to get the right damage numbers, and you're basically dumping everyone's ults and everything during his turn. Dr. Ratio has a more flexible flow. You could run Dr. Ratio as your slowest unit. I wouldn't run him slow for energy recharge purposes and stuff like that. But because Yukong using her skill and the way that she can overlap her skill with her ultimate to extend it, there's just more benefits that can be had, especially if he's doing a lot of his damage not on his own turn. So for an example, if Yukong's your fastest and then it's a Welt, Locha, and then Dr. Ratio, if Dr. Ratio had used his ult, say it's Yukong's turn, she uses her skill, it's Locha's turn. Use the Ratio ult so that the follow-up chance is there. Now when Locha attacks, the Dr. Ratio ult will come out. When Welt attacks, the Dr. Ratio ult will come out, or not ult, but follow-up attack will come out, and that'll be during the time frame of her skill. So there's a lot more flexibility in the speed tuning to make this team work out. Also, remember, we know that at least 3 debuffs is the magic number. That we want, okay? We know Welt puts out slow. We know Welt can put out his ultimate, and if you put an energy recharge rope on him and keep his speed up, he's actually can get it fairly quick. So that's 2 debuffs. It's also an imaginary team. You're probably playing against people who are weak to imaginary, so breaking them is going to put imprisonment, which is a debuff. So we already got like 2 just set up from this scenario. Usually when a character like this, who really requires debuffs to function, like Kafka, needs many dots to function at her peak. Dr. Ratio will likely have a debuff if he needs debuffs to excel, but they didn't say anything about it. And I will say, maybe this is too much a little bit. I'm not getting the kit detail, but like 1.6 had more changes during the beta phase throughout character developments than any other beta that I've done for this game. Like the kits that these characters had at the start had major overhauls during the process, and they may have major overhauls before it launches. It's
That's
one of
true.
those anti-leak statements. Don't get too excited about leaks, guys. I've
Yeah.
seen these leaks be completely wrong multiple times.
It's good to have testimony like that because some people really do put far too much stock into leaks, in my opinion, just to cause themselves unnecessary distress when a character actually releases. So fair enough. Quick question in the chat was, is entanglement and freeze considered debuffs? So, I mean, Draven, tell me if I'm wrong here. I think it's pretty straightforward. Anytime that
Entanglement
you're
is.
applying some sort of status to the enemy, it's kind of like a debuff. So all of the elements, all of the, I don't know, yeah, I guess elements is what we would call them, upon break are going to apply that element's debuff, so to speak. Not all of them are dots per se, but all of them are debuffs. Am I correct in that, Draven?
So far that I can recall, yes.
Fair enough.
I
Also,
mean,
Tyler, welcome in. Okay, so this is our imaginary team. We've also got a small change.
one more point.
Oh, please,
One
please.
more point was that in this team, the 4-piece imaginary is more ideal than the follow-up.
Oh.
Because with you're getting the debuffs. So with a 4-piece imaginary, you can kind of, if you're running him, you're running debuffs, so you're going to get that 10% crit rate most of the time. I mean, that's just how you're going to be running him typically, regardless of what team you put him on. You should be able to get the 10% crit rate buff. But the 20% crit damage buff that you get is only from when people are imprisoned. The imaginary team, imaginary break is how you get imprisonment, and Welt's ultimate does it. So in the case where you're running him with the full imaginary team, I think the full imaginary set is more beneficial because 20% crit damage, 10% crit rate is collectively better than 20% follow-up damage, because that 20% follow-up attack damage won't actually do anything for his ult damage.
Also, because you just did that, I do find it funny that we have Dr. Ratio and we do have L plus Ratio, and homie is literally putting an L up in the middle of his ultimate. Just a little side note right there. I'm sure other people have noticed as well. Okay, for this team too, we just have one small switch up. Rather than Welty, we're going to slot Silverwolf into the team. Now, what about swapping Welt for Silverwolf is going to benefit Dr. Ratio in this team comp?
One of the reasons I picked this is because Silverwolf just had a rerun. A lot of people have, and like Silverwolf, it's going to function very similarly. You're going to be getting debuffs. It's not necessarily relying on Welt's ultimate being up so much for the purposes of getting out his 3 minimum debuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ratio is a single target person. Silverwolf's the best single target defense down in the game. So basically, you're trying to make him into more of a hyper carry here. There's also the options depending on your Silverwolf. For those who just got Silverwolf or haven't done a lot of deep dives, Silverwolf at lower than E2 is best at break effect build, with her effect hit rate being high enough to get her debuffs out. So you're actually going to be able to run a duo DPS slightly similar. Plus, there's the fact that if she's on the team and they're not auto-weak to imaginary, here's your universal team. You take this team anywhere, they will get the imaginary weakness. They will have the quantum weakness if they didn't already have it. It's just pretty flexible for a wider range of content. And it seems like more people have Silverwolf than they have Welt. When it came to a full imaginary team, literally they're all 5 stars except for Yukong.
Sad.
So it's a little harder to, but this is just the secondary team we picked for an imaginary team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And chat, if you don't have like Lolcha in this instance, I don't have Lolcha. I've ran a pseudo mono imaginary team with Welt, Yukong, DHIL, and then Natasha as my healer. Again, don't get too attached to what we're showing on screen. Like, these are going to be the premium teams that are being suggested right now, but there's always going to be some flexibility in how you can change things up a little bit. Now, we're moving on from these imaginary teams to some Dr. Ratio follow-up teams. On this first team comp, we've got Dr. Ratio now paired with Clara, Topaz, and Lynx. So what about this helps that follow-up action happen?
All right, so this is similar to what I was that I will be using with my team here. Lynx is turning Clara into a preservation unit, making sure she's getting hit all the time. Also, as it was pointed out in your chat, that we are getting a free Lynx, so if you don't have Lynx, you will.
Yeah.
That makes it a little bit easier. The Clara Topaz team. So in this team, Dr. Ratio is not the star. I'm using this team currently with Jing Yuan, but as you know, Jing Yuan's only follow-up attack is Lightning Lord. Dr. Ratio has a whole lot more follow-up attacks. So when Topaz came out, she came out during the patch where her follow-up set came. Wait, was it? No, it wasn't.
I think it was the next patch.
Yeah, it was the prior one. When Topaz came out, people were a little underwhelmed. Just like Kafka, okay, no one was underwhelmed but me because I looked at numbers. Everyone else was very happy. These characters came out, all their pieces weren't out there yet. When the next patch came out, they got relic sets that heavily increased their values, but they still don't have a lot of characters out yet to make them shine the brightest. Dr. Ratio is actually going to make Topaz shiny. They're going to make each other shine mutually. And I like this idea of getting away from a singular hyper carry just because we've been doing it the whole time. So like the idea of opening that up a little bit differently is a bit fun. And this is a triple carry team.
True.
And the reason why Lynx works as a solo sustain is just because of who Claire is and how she functions. Otherwise, Lynx doesn't hit the solo sustain for the hardest content in the game right now. So for me, this is like your most optimal follow-up team. At the same time, Dr. Ratio is not the star of this. It's actually going to end up being Topaz. But Dr. Ratio is that piece that is now really making Topaz shine. We talked about Ruan Mei earlier. Solo sustain, Ruan Mei, Dr. Ratio, Topaz, when there's not 5 targets on the field. Yeah,
Fair.
That's where that comes into play. That's why in this team, there's 5 targets on the field, 1 big boss. Ratio and Topaz work on the big boss. Claire kills everything else.
Yep. Pretty nice. Pretty nice.
And if you're farming that follow-up set already, you've probably got pieces that work. I did a character review today where someone had me look at their Topaz. I'm like, man, that attack percent boot is not what we want. It's a great piece, except we want the speed boot. But I looked at it, I'm like, this is actually a near perfect piece for Clara. So they have a lot of gear that can be interchangeable. So while you're farming for one character, you're actually farming for multiple characters. So that always feels a little better.
Very resin efficient. So a quick question in the chat before I lose it. So would you recommend teaming up Dr. Ratio with both Silverwolf and Welt together, or is Yukong, her efficiency, is that required?
Okay. So you're saying Dr. Ratio, Welt, and Silverwolf together?
Correct.
My concern in this junction is then you're rolling a single solo sustain, which you were already trying to do, right? But it's really going to limit our options a little bit, depending on who your solo sustain is. So if it's Locha, easier, because Silverwolf only has the 2 elements to work with now. When you keep adding the new elements, or depending on the element situation you're going into, giving defense down to the enemy is good. But again, that's a very singular team with no options for a lot of AoE outside of Welt doing what he's doing. But most people don't have Welt built to where he's putting out enough damage for that to matter. This is why having someone like Yukong instead is going to increase Welt's performance on things outside of a single target. Plus, I mean, Yukong's giving like an 80% increase attack, while 40% decrease defense, and the other thing she does is nice. Yukong is also giving everyone crit rate and crit damage. Yukong's just bringing a lot more to that table than Silverwolf is in this specific case. But is this going to work that you mentioned? Probably.
Fair enough.
Are you going to have fun with it? That's what matters. But I think you can test that out. It just, again, a lot of the game modes want to have a little bit wider influence. And while Welt gives that to a wider frame, Yukong or Silverwolf is only debuffing a singular enemy really at a time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Also, Yo Rice, welcome in. So the 4th and final team that we have prepared for everybody to look at, again, is going to be more of a follow-up centric team, but this time we are swapping out Clara and we are adding Asta. Now, you just talked about earlier how with multiple enemies, it's good to have Clara so she can take out the plebs, while Topaz and Dr. Ratio kind of focus the elite enemy there. So why are we swapping out Clara and bringing Asta into the fold here?
So the idea here is that Asta's speed boost is 52 when you get it maxed out. If you got an E6 and all that, and you can actually, if you're building out her energy right, you can have 100% uptime on her ultimate. So sometimes if you're just hyper pushing Topaz that hard, that fast, then you're going to be drilling through things quick enough that maybe having the full AoE. Now, I'm not suggesting this for your pure fictions, but your memory of chaoses, this is going to run a little bit faster or a little bit better because of the extreme amount of speed boost. Also, her attack percent boost is really high for Asta once you get that first like 2 turns going and you keep the ult running. It's very high, and they're both benefiting it for a lot. And I just put Locha there. You can have, again, any solo sustain here, or if you want to replace Asta with Ruan Mei, that can also work. It's just this team is one that I am going to be using when I don't need Clara
Fair.
for the giant AoE. Basically, I think this one's going to be a little better for MOC.
Well, the good news here is it does sound like both of these characters so far, Ruan Mei and Dr. Ratio, are relatively flexible, multiple team builds that you can put around them, as opposed to, I know we brought up Kafka earlier, and surely there's flexible ways to build Kafka, but it seems like the clear-cut consensus on her is to match her with a couple other DOT applicators, and then, with sustain there. So it's cool that we've got Dr. Ratio can fit in a main DPS role, can be more of a secondary DPS. Ruan Mei's extremely flexible. That all sounds great. Chat, do you guys have any questions about Dr. Ratio before we move on to Xueyi? Type now or forever hold your peace, at least until later on. Draven, I know you don't have too much time left, so if we get a question quickly, sure. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to Xueyi real quick. Serval best Nihility character? I don't know about all that.
I wished. She was like my main party, and then I learned how the game worked. I'm like, my gosh, she has the worst kit in the game almost.
Sag. Chat, we're going to move on to Xueyi. This is our rate up brand new 4-star character that's coming in the front half of 1.6, aka Tuesday evening or Wednesday, depending on where you are in the world. We do know that she is a DPS that is strongly focused on depleting toughness. Her ultimate can deplete enemies' toughness while ignoring their weakness type, and she charges whenever an ally reduces an enemy's toughness. When her charges are stacked to their maximum capacity, her follow-up attack can be triggered. So it sounds like Xueyi's got a couple interesting tidbits here in her kit. What can you explain to us about her kit, Draven?
All right. So we talked about follow-up attacks and stuff like that. It says in here when charging, when the charges are stacked to their maximum capacity, don't think that she's going to be like Topaz, follow-up attacking constantly. This is going to be probably, from the wording that we get here, more like Blade, how he has a follow-up attack, but it's got to build up from things happening, and then it goes off. So I wouldn't look at her as a lead follow-up attack damage dealer, but she can benefit from it. So I wouldn't say put the follow-up attack set on her. That's not where the bulk of her damage is coming from. Keep in mind, she is a 4-star destruction character, chat. If you're sitting here thinking, oh, I'm going to get Xueyi and she's going to hit as hard as Blade, no.
Sag.
You can expect her to probably do better than Hook.
Hook didn't deserve this disrespect.
Anyone in my chat knows that, Hook, no. But her big role is going to be a sub-DPS toughness breaker role. Right? She's not going to be performing her best role as the main DPS. So I've tried doing the hyper carry on her with like Branya and Tengu and all kinds of options. It just does not turn out well. So, but where she does roll well is, we talked about Ruan Mei, right? Having 2 characters that can deal damage. What's Ruan Mei doing? Ruan Mei is boosting off of toughness breaks and weakness breaks and penetrate. Well, what Xueyi do? Ignore weakness type. I know people are going to ask about the Silver Wolf thing. It's kind of double dipping there. Like, the fact, part of Xueyi's kit here is that her ultimate can deplete enemies' toughness while ignoring weakness type. Why do we bring Silver Wolf? To apply weakness type. It's not really, you're just not going to get any use out of that aspect. So what I'm saying is that she is more flexible in the way that Silver Wolf's more flexible, but pairing them together is you're taking 2 aspects of their kit and just saying we don't need either of these.
2 of their primo aspects of their kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
But overall, more like a sub DPS. You know how people say you can build Welt as a solo, or as like a lead DPS? You can, but it doesn't do as good as most of the other hyper carries do. Xueyi is similar. You build her as DPS, but her biggest benefit is, as you see here, being able to break people, and she's going to be scaling off of breakness. the break effects here.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum Break is the strongest damage dealing break in the game. When she breaks enemies ignoring their weakness type, you can assume that the break she's going to give is her own element, because it's not saying, oh, well, it's going to use the element of who? Just random element, probably off of hers.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, what she can bring to a table is Quantum Break when there are no quantum characters in your team for doing out that massive damage. And if she's scaling off the break effect, this is why Silverwolf is the strongest break effect character in the game right now, is that Silverwolf, you stack break effect, it's a massive amount of damage. Silverwolf's job isn't the damage. Silverwolf's job is the nihility and the debuffs.
Mm-hmm.
So you take someone whose job is the damage and the weakness breaking, then give them the ability to weakness break people outside their type. That's where her damage is going to come in. So her initial hits and stuff, that's not what's really dealing her damage. It's breaking the enemies, proccing the quantum, and then having 5 other attacks hit the enemy before the enemy takes their turn. That's where her damage is going to shine. It's not going to be like Sela, where we use the skill or the ultimate and kill something. No, it's going to be based on the breaks.
Interesting. Keep that in mind, chat, because I think that is, like Draven mentioned, it's been a misconception that people have had. But we got to talk about potential light cone options here. So Xueyi, not a 5-star character, so, we haven't seen that she's getting her own kind of light cone just yet. So we don't have a signature light cone that we can assume will work well on her. So we've got 3 options available here. Fall of an Eon, which again, you guys can get out of the Herda shop, which is, where you do simulated universe, very free to play friendly, as well as the Mole's light cone and Arlen's light cone Secret Vow. Now, why exactly would any/all of these be good options for Xueyi, Draven?
All right, so Fall of an Aeon is giving you both attack increases, and it says that this, so it gives 8% attack at base level. I'll pop it up to 5. So it gives 16% attack when you have it superimposed 5.
Mm-hmm.
This effect can stack up to 4 times after a character inflicts weakness break on an enemy.
Interesting.
The wearer's damage increases by 24% for 2 turns. So if a character's idea is to break enemies and the light cone gives them bonuses when they do the thing, there's a more frequent chance that bonus is going to come into play.
Mm-hmm.
When looking at destruction light cones, honestly, destruction light cones are just very mediocre. The battle pass light cone's no good. Wolf talk time is no good. You'd think that Xueyi's light cone that literally has her and Hanya on it, called Under the Blue Sky, would be the ideal one.
Mm-hmm.
But that one scales your crit rate based on defeating enemies, which we already talked about how she's not going to be the one defeating the enemy most time unless they die during the quantum break.
Mm-hmm.
But she's not going to be rolling out as your lead DPS typically. So Arlen's is pretty simple. I mean, you're getting a flat damage percent up, and then if the enemy's current HP is equal to or higher than her current HP, then it's another 20% at base level.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning of a fight, if she's been hit at all, you'll get the 40. But basically, you're looking at a 20% damage increase. When compared to your other options, you're kind of limited. Welcome the Moles is giving you a 12% attack increase whenever you use a basic attack, skill, or ultimate attack on the enemies. And it stacks, I can't remember if it's 3, I think it's 3 stacks. So basically, you're getting a reliable attack increase. She seemed, I can't talk about the numbers actually.
Yep. Don't go too far.
But what I can do with numbers is, guys, when you're looking at, this is a general tooltip here. If you're looking at Imbibe Lunay's attack, basic, when you scaled up and it's 800% of his attack, that is going to scale stronger from increasing attack percentage gear than damage percentage gear, because it's scaling off so much of the attack. But if the attack is saying 200% of the person's attack and damage, then damage multipliers have a higher value because of what the baseline is. So a safe thing about specifically the 5-star light cone here is it's scaling attack and damage. So it's kind of a safe zone, no matter whether you're high attack scaler, low damage scaler. And again, it's available.
Yeah, very
even at
friendly.
S1 isn't terrible. If your option is S1, the Herd Shop Light Cone, or S1, one of these others, I would just go with the HSR Light Cone for Xueyi specifically.
Fair enough. Real quick, yo, Dre, Dayskit, Mabel, welcome in, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good Friday. We are in the middle of doing some character breakdowns for these 1.6 characters. We're moving on to our relic options here for Xueyi. So we've already talked a lot about weakness break, so maybe as no surprise to you guys, the Meteor set is here along with the Quantum set. And for our ornaments, again, we have got Salsado making appearance with Talia, Kingdom of Banditry. So how would you recommend that people use these 4-piece sets, 2 and 2? Talk to us about these relic recommendations.
All right, so the Quantum set, there's a way to cheese parts of the games by using the Quantum set for like every DPS character because of its 4-piece bonus that if the enemy is weak to Quantum, you get the 10%, ignore 10% of the defense. This is only valid if you're using her into enemies that are weak to Quantum. If you are doing her as your full Quantum team, say Fushuan with her, Sela, and Silverwolf, or swap in QQ anywhere in there, because it's what you like, then the Quantum set's going to be strongest. But most people are going to probably want to run her in a team where maybe they're weak to Quantum, maybe they're not. In which case, the break effect one just has a higher frequency of usage. Also, after a character inflicts weakness break on an enemy, regenerate 3 energy. It's not a lot, but it adds up. And if you have lots of ads on the field, say the swarm bugs, right? With her toughness break and stuff like that, you might be able to get a lot of breaks in there by just using her to break the smaller characters to develop energy to run the ultimate again, and then put the ultimate on the big boss and rotate it through. So we haven't had a real good use for the break effect set. We've had Silverwolf. Some people like to put it on Luca, and some people like to put it on Su Shang. If it's going to shine anywhere, it's going to shine more on her than it is the other characters we've had so far. Outside, well, debatable with Silverwolf.
Debatable.
Same thing with the Talia set is when your speed's at least 145 or higher. So that's a big part of the Talia set. If you're not getting her speed to 145, then definitely just go with innate Salsado. While we're building her as a break effect character and all that, the extra 8% crit from innate Salsado, most of her basic damage is coming off of her ultimates, follow-ups. Obviously, we'd mentioned that break is her most important damage, but it's not as frequent as the other bits are. So it's kind of a personal preference at that point. Also, we do not know yet if there is diminishing returns on break effect at any point with a character. I don't think that there is going to be, because there isn't on someone like Silverwolf, Su Shang, and Luca at the moment. So personally, for a general purpose, most widely used, because that's usually what I like to go for instead of being niche in my builds, I'd probably go with the Thief of the Shooting Star and the Talia. But if you can't get that 145 speed, then maybe the innate Salsado would be a little bit better for you.
Fair enough. Let's take a look at a couple team comp options. And to answer something in the chat, I believe people have done the numbers, and the moles can get 3 stacks on the light cone. So it doesn't say in there, but people way smarter than me have taken the time to look at it, and that's what they've come up with. So for this first team option here, I know some of you guys in the chat already mentioned it. We kind of talked about it a little bit as well, but we have Xueyi paired with Ruan Mei, this time with Jingliu and Huohua as their additional teammates. Now, we do know that Ruan Mei and Xueyi both enjoy some break effect, but Draven, what exactly is the synergy on this team here?
It's pretty much what you just said. So Xueyi is going to be trying to get the break effect out there. Honestly, ice break effect, while it does delay time a little bit, so does Quantum. So you're probably bringing this into an ice weak team already, in which case you're going to be able to break them fast, because we know that Jingliu goes real fast. And this is a culmination of what we talked about earlier. We have a solo sustain, we have Ruan Mei, we have 2 damage dealers. We also have a pretty big split of aggro. So that's going to help with someone like Huohua. Huohua's weakness is she doesn't have emergency heals, she doesn't have any giant heals. She has consistent good heals and debuff removal. You don't want, or not debuff removal, not just crowd control. So all these characters are probably get a pretty split. We got 2 destructions, which have 125 base aggro. I think they changed the number to just call it 5, because they realized it was all multiples of 25. So they have a base aggro of 5.
Fair.
And then the Abundance and Harmony have a base aggro of 4, so we're getting an even distribution of damage with this kind of a team, which means Huahua's solo sustain is going to go well here. Also, Huahua is providing increased energy recharge and attack up, which all of these characters benefit from the energy recharge, and all but Ruan Mei benefit from the attack ups. So it's just a team that right now a lot of people are kind of pushing for. Also, if you have Xueyi, chances are you rolled on Ruan Mei.
Yeah.
Because they're on the same banner together.
Yep. So you guys might have some synergy right out of the box, basically. And then for our other team comp that we can talk to you guys about, of course, we had to cover a mono quantum team here. This time we've got Xueyi paired with Sela, Fu Xuan, and Lynx. Draven already kind of touched on this earlier, but if you'd like to make any other comments about why a quantum team is going to be good, please do.
So with this one in general, you're looking at skill point management as well. So Xueyi's Destruction, you're going to probably want to use your skill frequently to be able to cleave the enemies. Sela cannot cleave enemies, so there's actually a nice little combination here that can work out pretty well. Is your Fu Xuan is going to be using, what, 1 skill point every 3 turns? Lynx is going to use maybe 1 skill point every 3 turns, but Sela is going to use her skill every turn that she can, and Xueyi is going to use every turn that she can. So what you can do, say an MOC fight where there's a big strong guy in the middle and then 2 moderate side guys, is you have Sela focus on the middle guy, while Xueyi is using her skill to kind of weaken down the side guys so that Sela can then go over there and pop on them. So it's actually a pretty decent distribution of damage with this team. But once again, one of Xueyi's advantages is that she can break non-quantum weak enemies. So you're just not taking advantage of that. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. This just helps free up the issue of Sela not being able to do any kind of cleave damage.
To the point that the chat's making, yeah, I think I messed up putting this team together. I just grabbed 4 quantum characters, but yeah, Silverwolf would probably slot better than having Lynx here. I'm so sorry, chat.
But everyone will have Lynx.
Quantum characters, yeah. Well, that is a good point. Not everybody has
And
Fu Xuan, everybody will have Lynx.
QQ does have a bit of an issue with skill point generation.
So, chat, the main point here, mono quantum will be viable with Xueyi, and like Draven talked about earlier, getting entanglement on the enemies is a great way to boost a little bit of extra damage out of your squad. So, you know, don't pay too close attention to this one team comp. I think I fumbled the bag on this final one. Couldn't go an entire presentation here without at least one scuff, you feel me?